What is going on, everybody? What is going on, the Catch fam? My name is John Dawson, and in today's video, we are breaking down our Week 1 starts and sits for the wide receiver position. If you do enjoy today's content, be sure to hit that like button on the way in, hit that subscribe button, of course, if you are new to the channel, and let me know in the comments down below if you guys have any questions, concerns. Moving into Week 1 of the 2022 fantasy football season, I will get back to you as soon as I can. Without further ado, let's hop into today's video. All right, Thursday night football kickoff for the 2022 NFL season. We got the Bills at the Rams, and this is an easy slide for me for today's video. I think you are starting everyone in this game. I think this is an absolute shootout. Even if you have a pretty stout defense for the Bills and a good secondary led by Jalen Ramsey for the Rams, I want to see Stephon Diggs in my starting lineup. If I drafted him, I want to see Gabe Davis. I mean, really two of the most sought out wide receivers through the offseason in fantasy drafts. You know, having that connection with Josh Allen, being in such an explosive offense. And on the flip side, having Cooper Kupp and the new addition for the Rams receiving room in Allen Robinson, I really think you can expect fireworks on both sides of things, and two really good quarterbacks throwing the football. I love everything about this matchup for all of the receivers involved. With that being said, outside of your primary wide receiver 1 and 2 on each team, let's keep a close eye on both the Rams and the Bills receiving room to see who kind of steps up. You got guys like Isaiah McKenzie, maybe a healthy Van Jefferson, maybe not for the Rams. So, you know, it's just going to be interesting to see how both of these dynamic offenses involve some of those number 3, number 4 receivers for the respective teams. So, like, if you own, you know, if you went out and you drafted McKenzie, I'm probably not starting him in this matchup, but I'm keeping a close eye on Isaiah McKenzie of the Bills for sure. And outside of that, just keep an eye on things overall. It's going to be a fun matchup, a great way to start this season as a whole. All right, 1 o'clock games on Sunday. Eagles at Lions. I've got A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith at the Eagles as starts. A.J. Brown really just going to bring those nice ceilings to your fantasy roster on a weekly basis. If you went out and you spent the draft capital on A.J. Brown, he is more than likely going to be in your starting lineup on a weekly basis. And you guys know that I've been a huge fan of Devonta Smith all offseason long. I really like this matchup for the Eagles wide receivers as a whole. I do think that the Lions will be able to keep things competitive, but overall I think we're going to see a good amount of points scored in this game. So I think you've got Devonta Smith as kind of that nice PPR blanket security type receiver for Jalen Hurts. I think A.J. Brown will kind of stretch the field to make those big plays. On the other side for the Lions, I really do like Amon-Ra St. Brown in this matchup. And with that being said, I like the Lions receiving room overall in this matchup, but I'm just not quite sure who is worth starting. There's a lot of names on that roster between DJ Chark, Josh Reynolds, and a plethora of other guys. And, you know, obviously J-Mo is on the bench at the moment, but overall, it's going to be interesting to see how the Lions utilize the talent they have at the wide receiver position. And even though Amon-Ra St. Brown gets a relatively tough matchup, I think overall he is worth starting moving into Week 1. All right, Niners at Bears. Obviously, if you drafted Deebo Samuel, he's in your starting lineup, and it's a great matchup for Deebo. I think he could have a really good Week 1 overall and remind us why he was such a dynamic and unique fantasy player last year. In terms of Brandon Ayuk, I also think he's a really good start. I mean, this Bears defense is just absolutely abysmal. So I love both Deebo and Ayuk in this matchup as a whole, and I like my boy Darnell Mooney, even though he gets the tougher matchup in respect to the defense he is facing on the day, facing the 49ers. I like Mooney. He has been a guy that I have really liked targeting in mock drafts all off season long. At the end of the day, I think he is a great security blanket for Justin Fields. If for some reason you own any other Bears wide receivers, you're not starting them, and I really don't think there's any other 49ers receivers worth mentioning as well. Steelers at Bengals. I'm starting Deontay Johnson all day long in this one. I really do think, regardless of the quarterback play, that Deontay is going to be fine this season. He has been a great value in mock drafts here in the offseason, in my opinion. Outside of Deontay Johnson, I think we kind of sit back and we see how this offense rolls out. You know, even if I'm not worried about Deontay Johnson, I'm still a little bit hesitant outside of Johnson at the receiver position. So I'm going to sit Chase Claypool and George Pickens. As much as I've been a Pickens fan throughout the offseason, I think you sit them in week 1 and see how this offense looks as a whole. And yeah, you are starting anyone in a Bengals jersey who is listed as a receiver that you drafted. So I don't care if it's Tyler Boyd, Jamar Chase, or our boy T. Higgins. They are all in your starting lineup. I mean, maybe in some leagues you don't need to start Tyler Boyd, but you guys get what I'm saying. This receiving core for the Bengals is just going to have a phenomenal year. They are all, to some degree worth being in your starting lineup at the end of the day. Jamar Chase is just going to have another great season in my mind, and T. Higgins, in my opinion, has been very underrated going into this season. I think Higgins is going to have himself a day, and I love my guy Tyler Boyd as a great PPR option as well moving into week 1. All right, Patriots at Dolphins. I'm starting Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. If you guys watch these starts and sits for the quarterback position, I didn't feel great about this game script as a whole for the Dolphins, but really more specifically for Tua. But I think at the end of the day that Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle are going to put up good fantasy stat lines on the day. I think Hill could have himself, a nice explosive type day that kind of reminds us why, he is Tyreek Hill and has been so sought after in fantasy leagues before his trade to the Dolphins. I think Jalen Waddle is kind of the opposite type of receiver. This is similar to the Eagles receiving room. I think Tyreek Hill is going to be stretching the field, making those big plays, and then Jalen Waddle is that nice PPR style receiver who's going to be a great security blanket for Tua throughout the whole game. On the other side, I would sit the Patriots wide receivers. If you do need to start someone, maybe in a deeper league, maybe in a 12-teamer, I'm not sure. Jacoby Myers is probably my pick just because of the targets he had last year in a very deep league. I would take a gamble on Kendrick Bourne because I do like the chemistry he has with Mac Jones. But overall, we're sitting the Patriots receivers, in my humble opinion, moving into week 1. All right, Browns at Panthers. No question in my mind, you're starting DJ Moore. A little bit of a tough matchup in terms of the secondary, but I think DJ Moore will be just fine, and he really is going to be that #1 target for Baker, that security guy who can also make some great big plays as well. And really, I think that the Panthers are going to come out and have a pretty good day. So I think that DJ Moore is going to be, really involved in this game as a whole, obviously being the #1 option. And outside of that, I would watch the Panthers wide receivers closely because we don't really know who Baker is going to favorite. Obviously, a lot of us think it's going to be DJ Moore, and I personally think with the talent that he is, it has to be DJ Moore. Guys like Robbie Anderson and Terrace Marshall Jr., we just want to keep a close eye on them and see, what chemistry develops with Baker or what chemistry has developed. So I think they're a sit for now, but keep a close eye on them as a whole. In my opinion, you're sitting the Browns wide receivers. I think Amari Cooper in some leagues is an okay start, but outside of that, we just want to sit back and see how this offense rolls out under Jacoby Brissett at the quarterback position while Deshaun Watson is suspended. All right, Colts at Texans. You're starting Michael Pittman all day long. This is a great matchup for Pittman. I think he's going to have himself a great day and a great week 1 with a new quarterback in Matt Ryan. I think you start Brandon Cooks as well. Not as great of a matchup for Cooks, but this is going to be, one of those seasons, I think, once again, where we see Cooks just be productive as a veteran receiver like he is, year in and year out. And on top of that, I would watch Nico Collins, right? He's been a big name here kind of towards the end of the offseason in the fantasy community. And I do think he could be a great wide receiver too for Davis Mills, but I'm just not confident enough, especially in what I think will be a bad game script for the Texans. I'm just not confident enough in starting him in week 1. With that being said, you probably want to watch the Colts receivers as well to see who really starts to develop some more chemistry with Matt Ryan outside of Michael Pittman. As talented as Pittman is, Matt Ryan is a good enough quarterback that he's probably going to develop some chemistry and help push the passing game throughout this season as well. But I think Pittman is easily the best player on this whole slide. I think the game script is 100% in his favor moving into week 1. All right, Saints at Falcons. And listen, I haven't been the biggest fan of going out and drafting Michael Thomas. I really just have had too many issues in the past 2 years with Thomas in fantasy that makes me confident enough to say go out and start him or really just go out and target him in your fantasy drafts. But at the end of the day, this is a great matchup for Michael Thomas. If you drafted Thomas, he should be in your lineups moving into week 1, maybe as a flex, right? I don't want to get too crazy, but as a flex, I think Michael Thomas is a good start just because this Falcons defense is not good whatsoever. And with that being said, I think Chris Olave is a really good start moving into the week as well. I really think he could have a nice week 1 outing. In terms of Jarvis Landry, maybe in deeper leagues, but overall, I think we just sit back, we watch this offense and really see how Jarvis Landry is utilized as a receiver. I do think Jameis Winston's going to have a good day. I really do think the game script is in favor of the Saints offensively. With that being said, I don't like this game script overall for the Falcons, and I think it's a really tough matchup with Drake London going up against Marshawn Lattimore and just a really good Saints defense. I would sit Drake London outside of deeper leagues, 14 teams plus. If you absolutely have to start him, I guess it's okay, but I really don't like this game script. I think if you have other options, Drake London is a sit for me. And at the moment, it still looks like he's dealing with an injury, so I'm not even sure if he's going to play. But if he does end up being in the starting lineup, I think he's a sit overall moving into week 1. All right, Ravens at Jets. This is a really good game script overall for Rashad Bateman, who will be your #1 target for the Ravens. So I would absolutely start Bateman. I think he'll get enough targets in this game to become a viable starter here in week 1. Outside of that, for the Jets receivers, I would start Elijah Moore. I do think he's a good start regardless of who the active quarterback is going to be. I think he'll be just fine with Joe Flacco. I mean, it's not a good game script whatsoever for the Jets, even it being a revenge game for Flacco and everything. But, you know, Elijah Moore played well regardless of the quarterback situation last year, and I do think he'll be able to garner enough targets in this game to have a good fantasy stat line. Outside of that, maybe keep an eye on the Jets wide receivers because there's a lot of interesting names in that receiving room, some pretty good talent as well. So I would just keep a close eye and we need to pay attention to who Joe Flacco is favoriting while he is a starting quarterback. But outside of that, start Elijah Moore. He's skilled enough. He has enough talent to be a starter who puts up a good fantasy stat line here in week 1. All right, got the Jaguars at the Commanders. I'm starting Christian Kirk. I love this matchup for Christian Kirk. I think obviously the Jaguars gave him the bag. He's going to get enough targets in this game for a respectable fantasy stat line, especially in full PPR. And it's just a great overall matchup for Christian Kirk. And on the flip side, it's a great overall matchup for Scary Terry and Jahan Dotson as well, going up against the Jaguars. So, you know, I talked about this in the starts and sits for the quarterback position. I actually really like this game. You know, I don't think either of these teams are going to be very good this season as a whole, but I like this game because both these defenses are not good whatsoever. So at the end of the day, this is a good game for fantasy points as a whole. I will keep an eye on the Jaguars wide receivers. We want to pay attention to, you know, who Trevor Lawrence ends up targeting and ends up favoriting, has that good chemistry with. I think Kirk is the safest bet, but there's definitely going to be one, maybe two more wide receivers who step up as the season progresses. So let's just keep a close eye on the Jags wide receivers moving into week 1. All right, Packers at Vikings. I would start Allen Lazard in this game, especially in full PPR. I think he'll get enough targets in what I think will be a shootout style of game, a close divisional game as a whole, that I think he is valuable here in week 1 as Aaron Rodgers' presumed #1 target. Obviously, you're starting Justin Jefferson if he's on your fantasy rosters. He's a starter no matter what. I don't care what defense he's going up against. And I do think that the Packers defense is going to be good this year, but overall, I think this, you know, is a positive game script in the sense that plenty of points will be scored overall. So I love JJ this week. I like Adam Thielen coming off of his injury as well. I think Thielen, you know, is really that favorite red zone target as a whole for Kirk Cousins, and this offense is expected under their new head coach to start throwing the football more. So love JJ this week, love my boy Thielen as well, and then obviously want to keep a close eye on the Packers wide receivers. Who is going to step up behind Allen Lazard? Is it my boy Romeo Dubes? Is it Christian Watson? Is it Sammy Watkins? You know, we want to keep a close eye. Does Randall Cobb get some touches? We just want to keep an eye on how this offense looks without Devontae Adams. But I think moving into week 1, Allen Lazard is your safest bet at the wide receiver position. All right, Giants at Titans. I'm starting Bobby Trees, man. I love this matchup for Robert Woods as a whole. And look, at the end of the day, this is your #1 receiving option on the Titans on paper. So I love Robert Woods going into week 1, even if I don't expect this game to be very pretty overall or expect the Titans to really have a great offensive outing. I like Robert Woods. I think he gets the targets, especially in full PPR. I think this is a good matchup. I would sit the Giants wide receivers as a whole. There's a point in the offseason where I was getting a little bit more confident Kenny Golladay maybe being the #1 option, but at the end of the day, when you've got Kadarius Toney floating around, you got Robinson floating around, Sterling Shepard's off the pup list, you got Golladay really looking bad the past couple of weeks after looking okay in terms of target share in the first week of the preseason. So for me, let's just sit back and see what happens with this Giants receiver room. If you want to stash, you know, one of these guys on your bench, I think that's okay, but outside of that, don't start anyone going into week 1, even if the Titans secondary is not very good on paper. Let's keep a close eye on Treylon Burks as a whole. Let's see how the young rookie comes out and plays in week 1, but I'm not confident in starting Burks in week 1 as this preseason has just been really weird in terms of how we've evaluated Treylon Burks. But Robert Woods absolutely is a start for me moving into week 1. All right, Raiders at Chargers. Obviously, if you drafted Devontae Adams, he is in your starting lineup. And really for this game, right, this is another shootout divisional game. This is going to be a great game overall. You're starting everyone who is a wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2 in my humble opinion, especially in full PPR. I think Hunter Renfrow is going to have himself a day. I really have been a fan of Renfrow all offseason. I love him in this matchup as a whole. In terms of the Chargers, once again, I mean, you're starting Keenan Allen, you're starting Mike Williams. There's no question about it. If you drafted either of those guys, if you spent the draft capital on them, they are on your roster for a reason. This Chargers offense is going to be truly electric throughout the year. I love all 4 primary receivers moving into week 1 in this matchup. All right, Chiefs at Cardinals. This is going to be another fun game, right? I love Hollywood Brown in this matchup. The Chiefs secondary is not very good on paper and just hasn't really performed in the past couple of years as well. So I like Hollywood Brown. I think he's going to have a good day. The targets will be there. There's a good chemistry there between him and Kyler Murray from their college days. And I like Rondale Moore in this matchup as well. I think he could put together a nice stat line. Maybe a better start in deeper leagues or 2 flex leagues, but I do like Rondale Moore going into this game as well. I would sit the Chiefs wide receivers like in deeper leagues, maybe 2 flex leagues. Maybe you take a chance on Juju or Sky Moore. But overall, I think if you're in a league where you only need to flex 1 player, you just kind of sit whatever Chiefs wide receiver you have on your roster on the bench for the week and really see how this offense rolls out and plays, who Patrick Mahomes is favoriting outside of tight end Travis Kelce. Listen, I do think that there's going to be productive fantasy receivers on this team, but I'm just not confident in rolling the dice in week 1 when we really don't know how this offense looks. I think the offense is going to be fine throughout the season, but I'm just not confident from a pure fantasy standpoint starting any specific receiver here in week 1. All right, Bucks at Cowboys. I'm starting Mike Evans. I'm starting Chris Godwin all day long. I mean, of course, if Chris Godwin is healthy, I'm starting Chris Godwin. I think he's on track to play week 1. If he doesn't play week 1, then obviously you're not starting him. But if Evans and Godwin are listed as healthy, they are starters for you. They are Tom Brady's number 1 and number 2 options on the field, and both extremely talented receivers. And I'm starting CeeDee Lamb all day long. I just love this matchup for these Bucs receivers and Cowboys receivers in terms of their primary receivers. I think CeeDee Lamb's going to have a great outing in week 1. I would sit Julio and Russell Gage. Let's kind of, take a step back. Let's see how Julio is implemented into this offense. Maybe outside of, really deep leagues, maybe then Jones or Gage could be an option. But I think the best thing to do is just sit them in week 1. Maybe if Godwin doesn't play, you roll the dice. But I just think most rosters out there, you won't need to. I would watch the Cowboys wide receivers very closely. We want to see, if Gallup is not playing, we want to see who steps up as number 2 options. Probably going to be Tolbert, but I'm just, once again, not too confident unless you're in a really deep league rolling dice on a Cowboys wide receiver this week outside of CeeDee Lamb. But I do think if you have to, this is going to be a fun, high-scoring affair. I just don't want to pull the trigger moving into week 1. All right, Broncos at Seahawks. Man, I absolutely love this matchup for Courtland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy. I think they're going to both have phenomenal days. This is just it's a ridiculous matchup. I mean, really, any Broncos players have been must starts for me moving into week 1. This revenge game for Russell Wilson is just going to be an absolute, blowout. In terms of the Broncos offense, they're going to have a phenomenal day. So I love Sutton in this matchup, and I love Jeudy. Obviously, if you drafted them, they're probably in your starting lineup regardless. And I would start DK Metcalf. Definitely not as good of a matchup going up against Pat Surtain. But if you need to start him as a wide receiver 2 or a flex option or a second flex option, I think that's fine because the targets will be there for him as a whole. And I think really Geno Smith as the QB1 won't have a lot of options outside of Metcalf in terms of who he wants to target throughout the game. I do like Tyler Lockett. Don't get me wrong. He is an extremely talented receiver. He was your wide receiver 15 in full PPR last year in fantasy. But at the end of the day, I just don't like this matchup or the game script enough to start Tyler Lockett. I think he's going to have plenty of games this year where he is a valuable fantasy starter. But this game script, I'm just not a fan of. If you really need to in a deeper league, 2 flex league, I guess it's okay, but I'm just not crazy about Lockett this week. Metcalf, I do think will have enough targets to put up a respectable fantasy line, especially in full PPR. Sutton and Jeudy, absolute must starts. This matchup is just stupid for both these Broncos receivers moving into week 1. And that'll do it for today's video. There are your start and sits at the wide receiver position for Week 1 of the 2022 fantasy football season. Be sure to let me know in the comments down below if you guys have any questions about which wide receivers you think you may or may not be starting this week on your respective roster. If you have any questions, comments, concerns pertaining to the 2022 fantasy football season, feel free to drop them down below and hit that like button on the way out if you guys did enjoy today's content. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, of course, if you are new to the channel. And with that, I'll say thank you guys so much for watching and or listening. And remember, you guys saw it here on The Catch.